I love small studio lights. They are very compact, easy to carry. I can even power them using battery and I can fit them pretty much anywhere, so they are just super flexible. However, the biggest downside of small studio light is they are just not as bright as the bigger, higher power lights. So when I need a lot of light, they may not be bright enough. But this new Colbor CL60 light may have solved the problem because you can connect multiple of them together easily and control all of them together as well and turn this little light into a big super bright light. Good morning everyone, Richard here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at the new Colbor CL60 series LED light. There is a CL60 and a CL60M. They are both 65 watt LED lights, and the main difference is that the CL60 is a bi-color light and the CL60M is the daylight balance light. Colbor has sent me samples of the CL60, the bi-color version, for this review. So this is what I've been using for all the testing. But both versions, they have very similar design, like the size, construction, design, power option, connectivity, etc. So even though I'm going to focus on the CL60, but a lot of things that I'm going to talk about in this video would still apply to either version of the Colbor CL60 series lights. Okay, let's start this review by doing a quick unboxing together, and I will show you what comes with the Colbor CL60. When you open the cardboard package, you first see the carry case. It is similar style to the one for its bigger brother Colbor CL100, but the size of this carry case is much smaller. It is a pretty nice quality carry case and it should provide decent protection to the light. Inside the case, you will find a Bowens Mount adapter and a light refractor. We need this adapter because the size of the light is too small to have the Bowens Mount as part of the light. We have the instruction manual that is in English, a strap for the carry case, and a 80 watt power supply that looks really like my MacBook Pro's power supply. It has a USB-C cable attached to it, and the cable is not removable. And then we have the mounting base for you to mount the CL60 onto a light stand. You can adjust the tilt angle, and this is mostly made of metal, unlike the one for the CL100, which is mostly made of plastic. And last but not least, we have the Colbor CL60 light. It is very compact, as you can see. There is a pretty large LED panel at the back of the light. Remember to remove that black protective cover at the front and also the plastic sticker before you turn on the light. Okay, now we know what comes with the Colbor CL60. Let's have a closer look at the design of the light. If you have watched my Colbor CL100 review, you will notice this new CL60 looks a little bit similar to the CL100. But if you look at these lights side by side in real life, you will notice some significant difference. You may remember I mentioned in my Colbor CL100 review that the CL100 has a pretty plasticky construction. The light itself and even the light stand mount are mostly made of plastic. But this time with the CL60, even though it is smaller and a cheaper light, but it has a much better and more premium construction. The light is mostly made of metal and it feels very solid. It's not plasticky at all. Even the tiltable mount is also made of metal and it has a much better design, so much stronger than the plastic one on the CL100. So overall, the build quality of this CL60 is a huge improvement compared to the CL100 that I reviewed just about 1 year ago. It just feels much higher quality even though the price is still super affordable. And as I've mentioned before, the Colbor CL60 is a really compact studio light, and despite its metal construction, the weight of the light is just about 500 grams, so it's extremely lightweight as well. I'm pretty sure this is the lightest studio light that I have ever tried myself. Because the CL60 is so compact and so lightweight, it gives us a lot more flexibility on how or where we can mount the light. Of course, we can put it on a normal light stand, but I can also put it on a small tripod or even a tiny desktop tripod can still handle it. For me, I'm going to mount them on one of the arm on my desktop Sepon Photoplus setup. I've been wanting to place a light there for a while. However, because my desktop Photoplus setup is just clamped onto the edge of a wooden board that's sitting on top of my desk, so I don't really want to put something too heavy on it. But this CL60 light is perfect. So now I finally have some overhead lights for my desk that I can use for product photography. The tiltable mount is removable as well because you may not need that for your light. And the reason is Colbor has created something called Power Cube design for the CL60. Basically, you can attach a CL60 onto another CL60 by just sliding one onto the rail of another CL60 light. You don't even need to use any tools to do that. You could even have multiple CL60s all joined together and it becomes a big and super bright light. You may wonder, how do you control all the lights then? Well, it is super easy, very inconvenient, and I will talk about that in a second. Now let's have a look at the back of the light. We have a pretty big 2-inch LED screen, the power button, and 2 control dials, and then also 4 more buttons here. The screen is pretty bright and it has all the important information displayed on it. The control is pretty straightforward. Press the CCT button to go into CCT mode, which is for constant light output. You can then use the dial at the top to adjust the power output. You can adjust it in 1% step by just pushing the dial up or down a little bit, or push and hold it to change it in 10% steps. Or you can just push the dial in and it will jump by 25%. My only complaint is, when you are changing the power in 10% steps quickly, the display's refresh rate seems to be a bit slow, so you may not be able to read the number on the display very clearly when you are adjusting the power output. But other than that, I really like what Colbor has done. You can adjust the power setting very quickly or very precisely, or from the same dial. By default, CL60 uses a smooth setting to handle the output power change. What it means is, say if you push in the dial and adjust the power in 25% steps, it will gradually change the power output so it happens smoothly, but also takes a little bit of time. This is especially noticeable when you change the power output from 100% back to 0%. There is a probably 3 seconds or so delay before it reaches 0%. For me, I prefer the change to happen instantly. Luckily, I can do that by just go to the setup screen and choose the sharp setting for the response, which means any changes would happen instantly and I don't have to wait at all. With the CL60, you can also adjust the color temperature using the dial at the bottom. You can change it in 50-degree steps or 100-degree steps, or jump to one of the preset very quickly in similar way. Now obviously, if you are getting the CL60M, which is the daylight balance light, then you cannot change the color temperature. If you press the EFF button at the back, then the light would operate in effects mode. There are a total of 10 different effects, and with each effect you can adjust the power, and with most of them you can also adjust the color temperature as well. And one more thing you can adjust is the speed or rate of the effect. By pressing the rate button, you can change how fast the effect is. And then we have the set button on the left, which would bring up the settings menu, and there are quite a few different settings that you can change there. I will talk about some of these settings later on in this review. So overall, the controls are pretty straightforward, and the large screen also help you to understand what settings you are using. If you have used any studio lights before, then you probably don't need to read the menu at all. And even if this is your first studio light, it would probably only take you maybe 10 to 20 minutes to understand how to operate this CL60. The CL60 has a cooling fan inside, and the fan is not too loud. In this room, I can hear the cooling fan, but it's not really any louder than any other studio light I have in this room and not louder than my MacBook Pro's cooling fan as well. You can switch the cooling fan to quiet mode if you want to minimize the fan noise, but the maximum brightness will be restricted. Because of the size of the light is pretty small, so with the light just by itself, you cannot mount any light modifier onto it. But the light does come with a Bowens Mount adapter and a reflector for it. So you could use the adapter to mount any Bowens Mount light modifier onto the CL60. I probably wouldn't recommend you to mount a huge softbox onto the CL60, but a medium-sized softbox would work perfectly fine with the Colbor CL60. And one tip I want to share with you guys, when you want to use light modifier, you should first mount the light modifier onto the adapter first, and then mount them together onto the light. I find it easier this way than mounting the adapter onto the light first. Now let's talk about the most interesting feature of the Colbor CL60. It is the power cube and the matrix control system. Together, they allow you to combine multiple CL60s and control them together very easily. So you can attach a CL60 onto another one by just sliding one onto another one's mounting rail, as I mentioned before. You can even attach multiple CL60 together and turn it into one giant light, and then you can control them all from one of the CL60, and the setting will be automatically applied to the rest of the lights. What you need to do is just assign all the lights to the same group, and then they would communicate with each other wirelessly even if they are not physically connected together. When you change the settings on one light, the new setting would apply to the other lights automatically. You could choose to have only one light as the master that controls all the other lights by setting one light as the transmitter and all the other lights as receiver, or you can set them all to be both transmitter and receivers. That means you can use any of the CL60 to control the rest of the CL60s. A maximum of 10 CL60s can be connected together with the matrix control system. So if you place 10 CL60s together, you basically have a super powerful 650 watt light, or you can place them separately to create the lighting effect you want. One limitation when joining multiple CL60s together is that you cannot use any Bowens Mount light modifier because all the lights are touching each other, so there's no space for that. You could use a standalone light diffuser or something similar instead. Now, since the light communicate with each other wirelessly, there is a maximum transmission range, and it is approximately 10 meters or 33 feet. To be honest, 10 meters isn't really that far away. If you want to light up a large outdoor scene, you may need a longer range. Fortunately, you could do that by setting one of the CL60 as a repeater to extend the range. Then you can extend the communication range and control lights that are more than 10 meters away from your master light. Colbor also suggests if you have 5 CL60s working together, then the CL60 in the middle should be configured as a repeater to improve the response time when you are changing settings. Or if you are connecting 10 CL60s, then set 2 of them as repeaters. But don't go crazy and turn every single one of your light into repeaters, as having too many repeaters than needed would make the response time slower instead. Speaking of response time, with my setup that has 2 CL60s, when I change the setting on one light, it would usually take about a second or so for the other light to synchronize the changes. For normal usage, say when you are adjusting power or the color temperature from one light, a 1 second lag between the lights is not really noticeable and wouldn't really matter. The only time that I wish there is no lag is when I use the lights in effects mode. When the lights are flashing or changing rapidly, the delay would be quite noticeable, especially when you place the lights together. So this is something that you need to aware of if you are planning to group multiple SL60s together and use the effects mode. The CL60 is a pretty compact light and the power is 65 watt, so it is one of the smallest bicolor LED studio light in the market, but it's still a pretty bright light. According to Colbor, the maximum brightness is about 2800 lux at 1 meter with just the bare bulb. That is not bad at all for a 65 watt bicolor light. If you use the reflector that comes with the CL60, then the maximum brightness is about 20,000 lux at 1 meter. The daylight balance CL60M is about 22,500 lux at 1 meter with the reflector. But the quantity of light or how bright it is only one of the important things for an LED light. The other very important thing is the quality of light. According to Colbor, the CRI rating for the CL60 is 97 plus, which is really good for a budget bicolor light. A lot of the budget bicolor lights in the market only has the CRI rating of 95 or some even lower. Actually, even some of the more expensive lights only can reach 96 CRI, so the CRI rating for the CL60 is really good. What it means is CL60 should allow you to capture your scene with rich and accurate colors. Now, these are just figures from the manufacturers, so I did some tests myself. The first test I did is in my garden in the evening. The camera setting I used to shoot this scene was 1/52 f2.8 and ISO 6400. Now, I turn on the CL60 and it light up my garden pretty well. It's really not bad. I only did a very quick test because I was a bit worried about I might upset my neighbor with the CL60 shooting directly towards their house, as it is really quite bright. And it is just a single CL60. A CL60M will be about 10% brighter, and remember we can easily add more CL60s together as well if you want to have a brighter light. The CL60 is a bicolor light, so the temperature is adjustable from 2700K to 6500K, so you have a decent range of color temperature that you can use. Now, I don't have any fancy equipment to measure the CRI rating, but from what I can see, the light output from the CL60 does appear to be really nice and give me saturated and nice colors even compared to my other more expensive studio lights. With the CL60, it comes with a 80 watt AC power supply which has a USB-C connector that plugs into the back of the CL60 to power the light. I think some people may not really like using a USB-C connector to connect the power because it is not as durable as some other connector used in the other studio lights. But the advantage of using the USB-C connector is that you can actually power the light using a PD power supply as long as it supports the PD 3.0, 20 volt 4A. And as far as I know, this Colbor CL60 is the first studio light that can be powered by a USB PD power source. You can also power the light using other power solutions such as V-band battery or the Sony NP-F style battery using optional accessories to connect them to the light. So it is definitely pretty flexible in terms of power options. I think my only nitpicking comment would be when you have multiple lights joined together, you would still need to have a power source for each of the light. So if you have 5 CL60s together and shooting indoor, then you will need 5 AC power adapters with 5 USB-C cable that connect to your setup. But I think this is the only downside if you want to use a lot of CL60s together. Just like a lot of other latest studio lights in the market, the Colbor CL60 also has a smartphone app called Colbor Studio, and you can use this app to remotely control your CL60 as well as other Bluetooth-enabled Colbor lights. The app has a pretty clean, simple interface. There are 3 main screens for you to manage the lights you want to control, assign them into groups, and then a console screen for you to control them either individually or all together. You could also use the app to update the firmware of your CL60 lights as well. The app is really not overly complicated and it is pretty responsive. It connects to the light pretty quickly. Apart from occasionally the initial setting maybe not in sync when I turn on the lights, everything else works really quite well. But one thing that I really like about using the app with this CL60 lights is, even when the lights are all turned off, you can just launch the app and then use the app to turn the lights back on. So this is very convenient compared to some other lights that you need to physically go to the light and switch them on first before you can use the app to remote control it. So that means you can leave your CL60 light mounted on the ceiling or somewhere that you can't easily reach, and then you can just remotely switch them on or off using the app and control them wirelessly. When I reviewed the Colbor CL100 about a year ago, I thought the CL100 is a good budget light and good value for money, but it's also quite easy to see it's the first studio light from Colbor. There was nothing really wrong with the CL100, but I've mentioned quite a few of the issues that I noticed in my review, and it just feels a little bit unpolished overall. But now, 1 year later, we have this new Colbor CL60. While the aesthetic design is very similar to the CL100, but when you look at it a little bit closer, it is like the CL60 is created by a completely different company. The CL60 is just a lot more polished in almost every single area. Build quality is very solid. It doesn't feel plasticky anymore and no longer feel like a budget light. With this CL60, Colbor has addressed pretty much all the major things that I've complained about the CL100. But with all these improvements, Colbor still keep the price very friendly. The CL60 is only US $149 and the CL60M is even cheaper at $129. They are both really cheap and definitely fantastic value for money. And then we have this new Power Cube design and the matrix control system, which allow us to add more output power easily when we need more light. And because these lights are just so cheap, so I think if you are interested in the Colbor CL60, I would really suggest you to buy at least 2 or 3 of them at the same time, as I think that's really the best way to use this Colbor CL60 lights.